My watch says 6.
I guess it is. Okay.
This meeting of the Code Enforcement Board for the City of Cape Canaveral is now called to order. Would the secretary please call the roll?
Ms. Russell,
Here.
Mr. Clooney,
Here.
Mr. Hale,
Here.
Mr. Hartley,
Here.
Ms. Collins.
Here. Thank you. Let's look at the March calendar. It looks like March the 21st will be our next meeting date. If you already know you're not going to be available on that date, let Ginger know so she can run down our other suspects, right? Under new business, we need to approve the minutes of 2 meetings, September the 20th, 2018, and January the 24th, 2019. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes as published? Hearing none, let's call a vote. Do you want it separately or together?
Together's fine. Ms. Russell,
4.
Mr. Clooney,
4.
Mr. Hale,
4.
Mr. Hartley,
4.
and Ms. Collins.
4.
If you're going to be giving testimony before this court tonight, in any case, please stand and be sworn in by our city attorney.
Please raise your right hand. You're going to testify if you swear or affirm that the testimony you give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Okay, and have they already signed in? At some point, there's a place to sign in up front if you're going to be, if you were one of the persons who was just sworn in. Under compliance hearings, our first case is number 2017-166. This is a laundry list of violations of property at 526 Jefferson Avenue, Bogart Place Properties, LLC, Jeffrey Wells property owner. Mr. Palmer, is this you?
Yes. First of all, I would just like to inform the board that the building official, Mike German, is here, and he has been sworn in, and he can answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, one moment. Are our screens turned on?
Yes, they should be on. Are your green lights on?
Nope.
Mine is.
All right, hit your button there where it says push.
Which button should this?
They should be all on.
The mic's on, but the screen's not on.
Your screen is
Oh,
not
the
on?
screen, no, the screens aren't on.
Are you seeing any from out there?
Yes. All right, let's try this.
Somebody pulled our plug?
I'm not sure, they all were working. Let's see. All right, somehow they might have gotten turned on.
Oh, here they come.
Right here, see with the red button?
There's a little red light there, but there's nothing to push.
Yours coming on, Mary?
Not yet. But at least you printed this out for me. Ah, all right. Not at all like a Samsung to be reluctant. Okay, now, we're almost there.
Can I get Fox News on this?
There you go. Okay.
Okay, let's try that again. Under compliance hearings, the first item is case number 2017-166, property located at 526 Jefferson Avenue, Bogart Place Properties, LLC, Jeffrey Wells property owner. And now it's back to Brian.
The address is 526 Jefferson Avenue. The violation was for property maintenance. Board order was sent out 8/8/2018 with a return receipt of 8/10/2018. Notice of hearing was sent out 1/31/2019 with a return receipt of 2/4/2019. Just real quick, on 7/19/2018, this case was presented to the Code Board, who ruled unanimously to give the respondent until 8/3/2018 to bring the property into compliance, or a fine in the amount of $100 for the first day and $75 per day thereafter be imposed. On 2/14/2019, staff conducted a site visit and found the property to be in compliance.
Okay.
I'd like to go straight into the staff recommendation. Staff recommendation is based on testimony and evidence submitted at this hearing. Staff respectfully requests that the Code Enforcement Board find the respondent in non-compliance of Board Order 17166 from 8/4/2018 to 2/13/2019, and that the property is currently in compliance. Staff also recommends no liens or fines be levied at this time.
Just basically a recording of what occurred with the time it took to fix the issues?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Anybody have a comment or a question? We need a motion.
I move we accept staff recommendation.
Second.
Double on the second. Sure. Okay. If there's no further discussion, Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Ms. Russell,
4.
Mr. Clooney,
4.
Mr. Hale,
4.
Mr. Hartley,
4.
Ms. Collins. 4.
Okay, takes care of the first one. Thank you. And item number 2, case number 2018-20, dash 212. This is property located at 8501 Astronaut Boulevard. This is, Mr. Marco Giannakis, property owner.
I guess we have these out of order. They're doing yours next. I guess these are out of order.
They are. How?
Who'd we lose?
It should
They're
be.
doing astronaut next.
Oh, you want to skip to the
No, it should be.
Caroline Street?
Yeah, 8501 Astronaut.
We just go to astronaut.
No.
Nope.
No, because, case 18191 comes before 18212. So if we can just go with the,
With the public hearing, that's the first item under public hearings.
it should not have been, yes, that, I'm sorry, I apologize for that. We should, it's up to you, Madam Chair. Would you like me to go ahead with mine under compliance hearing done? I was thinking that it was going in order, but I realize now that we should do compliance hearings first and then public hearings.
Okay, let's just do it, because I think it will be quick. Is that correct? Mr. Chris, do you mind if we do that? Okay. Back to case number
Sorry about that.
2018-212.
That was on me. Let me, find my thing. Bear with me. A lot of slides.
Ha, we're getting
There we
back.
go. Sorry about
Okay.
that. Once again, that was my fault. Normally, we go by case number, and that's what I did. Okay, the address is 8501 Astronaut Boulevard. The violation is for paving of vehicle use areas. As I informed the board last time, the section 110-555 does state that all commercial and industrial areas used for display or parking of any and all types of vehicles, boats, or heavy equipment, and all land upon which vehicles traverse the property as a function of the primary use, including but not limited to drives, parking, service, and display areas, shall be paved. Board order was sent 10/16/2018 with a return receipt of 10/22/2018. The notice of hearing was sent 1/31/2019 with a return receipt of 2/6/2019. This is the property. The property that states right there, 759, is also a portion of what our, they're not, they weren't cited under the violation, but that's a portion of it, and you'll understand here. Between 5/13/2018 and 2/13/2019, staff has received numerous complaints regarding the parking of vehicles on the grass area adjacent to Southern Charm, which is 8501 Astronaut, and the vacant lot north of 8501 Astronaut. 9/20/2018, the case was presented to the Code Board, who ruled unanimously to continue this issue to the next Code Board. 11/14/2018, the property owner of 8501 Astronaut contacted staff stating he had erected a fence to keep individuals from parking on the grass. Staff conducted a site visit and observed a fence had been placed along the north side of the parking area. However, the fence did not go all the way to the dumpster enclosure, and vehicles were still parking under the tree and on the north side of the fence. On numerous occasions, staff has also been informed the owner of Southern Charm is parking on the grass along Astronaut on weekends. On 2/6/2019, staff made contact with the owners of the vacant lot north of 8501 Astronaut and requested a notarized letter giving the city of Cape Canaveral permission to tow or cite any vehicles illegally parked on the vacant lot. On 2/15/2019, the property owner 8501 Astronaut contacted staff stating he had placed a cable from the end of the fence to the dumpster area enclosure along the north side of the parking area. Staff asked the property owner if he was willing to sign a letter giving the city permission to tow or cite any vehicles parked in the grass area on his property. The grass area that we are referring to, and I've already spoken with the property owner about this. If you look at the top of right underneath or right south of, north is to the top of the screen, south of course is to the bottom. Just south of 759, you see a triangle area of grass. That's the grass we are speaking of. That's the grass area we are speaking of. They really can't park on any other grass on this property because behind the property is a culvert and on the other side is a retention pond. This is the only portion of this property that is of Mr. Marco Giannakis's property that we're concerned about.
Could you go back 1 second to that slide?
Which one?
The one you just showed that showed the shape? Is the dumpster there most straight beneath the 9 and 759? Is that dark spot the dumpster and that's where the cable goes to now?
The dumpster is, do you see 753.1?
Yes?
The dumpster is adjacent to that property. It is on the bottom portion of the triangle.
Okay, so if you were making a right triangle out of it, it would be the 90-degree angle. Right there, got it. Yep, that's what I just said, I think. Okay, so where's the cable go? From the end of the white fence to the dumpster?
I will show you that in a moment.
Okay,
Here's the sign that's on the property. I showed you this last time during the hearing. This is on 120 of 2019. The truck you see in the picture there that's parked in the grass, that is actually not Mr. Marco Giannakis's property. That is the vacant lot property to the north. This is the owner of Southern Charms pickup truck. And this 120 2019 is a weekend. 2/2 of 2019 was also a weekend. And in the background, you can see the white fence that the property owner has erected. This is his white fence that he erected, and individuals were still parking just, I guess that would be west of it. And here is the cable. You can see that he has marked it with the tape, the orange tape, to keep people from parking on the grass. I've been by a couple times this week since he's put it up. It seems to be working. The next, well, let me just leave it at that right now. As you can see at the top of the screen, it goes all the way to the dumpster enclosure.
okay.
There's another angle of it. And then one where you can see it's attached to the white fence. And as you can see, there's a truck in the picture there. And he is parked on the pavement itself instead of pulling into the grass. Mr. Marco Giannakis is here. I don't think do you want to say anything? Do you have any questions for him?
I got one question, it's probably for you.
Okay.
Has any car been cited?
Not as of yet. We just received the letters.
Okay, so that's effective in the morning, huh?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else have a question, please? Ask away.
Real quick, for the board's information, I have both letters here. One signed by the Surf East Inc., who owns the property to the north, and one just now signed by Mr. Marco Giannakis, giving us permission to cite and tow illegally parked vehicles. We will be providing Mr. Marco Giannakis with a map outlining his area that he has concerns of.
Do we, Ms. Dutcher, do we want copies of those letters entered as exhibits?
Well, do you feel it's relevant? Relevant for the board's determination of whether compliance or non-compliance?
I can't see that it
Mr.
would hurt.
Officer Robinson's going to get you a copy of the other one. Here's a copy that you can have of this. This
Okay.
will be Exhibit 1, that'll be Exhibit 2.
Thank you. No questions, this is a quiet group.
One of our issues in the past with this property and this trying to bring compliance to this issue was we didn't have the ability to do what we can now with these letters. We didn't have that ability before. That was up to the property owners to do. Well, the property owners are, the one to the north is an absentee owner. They're actually in Hollywood, Florida. Thank you. Mr. Marco Giannakis isn't always here also. He spends a lot of time in Greece. So he doesn't have a lot of, he's not always here. So we can contact him and say, hey, look, we need a vehicle towed, we need this. Now we have that ability to do that. Mr. Clooney asked me last time, what does he need to do to bring this property into compliance? He's erected a fence, he's erected a cable, he has blocked it off from them able to access that grass area from his property. The only way they can access the grass area now is either from A1A or from Ocean Carpets, which is just to the north. Ocean Carpets, there's no requirement for them to block off that area to keep people from driving through. Our next step bringing this property into compliance was getting letters so we can cite and tow these vehicles. I think if we cited a couple vehicles, maybe even had a tow truck pull up, I think this issue would stop. We've been by in the past few days. I haven't seen anybody parking on the grass in the past couple days since he's put up the cable.
Mr. Palmer, is there any signage there? No
Yes, there
parking?
is.
Okay.
Yeah, it was on
It
one of
was in a
those.
picture?
Yeah, it was in
Okay,
one of the pictures.
thank you. Got it.
He has signs right there that says private property, no trespassing. And then there's other signs here that state, will be towed or ticketed at owner's expense. If I can get to him, I will. be
Sounds
more
like he's done all he can do except building walls.
Private property, no parking, unauthorized vehicles will be ticketed, towed at owner's expense. This says that you cannot be on that property because unauthorized vehicles will be ticketed or towed.
Any more questions, comments? Let's hear a motion, please.
Let me read my,
I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I cut you short, Brian. Excuse me.
based on the testimony and evidence submitted at this hearing, staff respectfully requests that the Code Enforcement Board find the respondent in violation from 5/13/2018 to 2/15/2019, and that the property is currently in compliance.
Asking for a fine?
He's asking for a motion
No,
to.
just to find him in violation of the
That's
notice
just
of
to establish
violation
the dates.
between 5/13 and 2/15, but that the property is currently in compliance. I would like the board to establish that there was a violation between those two dates. However, there is no violation at this time.
A good idea.
I move we accept the staff recommendation.
Second?
Motion and a second. Any further questions? I'm gonna call the vote, please, Ms.
Ms.
Wright.
Russell,
4.
Mr. Clooney,
Or,
Mr. Howe,
or,
Mr. Hartley,
Or,
Ms. Collins.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Giannakis. Mr. Marco Giannakis, I can get it all there. Okay, now we're gonna go to public hearings, case number 2018-191. This is, various and sundry things regarding Palms East, owner, Jeff Wells, property owner. This is Palms East of Cape Canaveral LLC.
All right, bear with me, I've gotta get back.
Now you gotta run through those pictures again, huh? This time we're going forward instead of backwards.
Okay. 211 Caroline Street, Cape Canaveral, Palms East of Cape Canaveral LLC. Parcel ID is posted. This is a violation is for property maintenance. Notice of violation was sent 3/12/2018, return receipt 3/14/2018. Notice of hearing was sent January 26, 2019, return receipt was January 31st, 2019. This is the property area right here. There's Caroline Street. The 7-Eleven is up there on North Atlantic Avenue, just to the west. 2/28/2018, staff received a complaint of exterior property maintenance issues. A site visit revealed air conditioning ground units were visible from the right-of-way. Air conditioning units on the wall were missing grates and had weeds growing out of them. Vehicle shade structures were damaged, missing, and some toppled over, creating a hazard. Discarded furniture deposited around the property and placed against dumpster enclosures. Inoperable vehicles parked on the property. Missing or damaged roof trim and soffits. Paint chipping from doors and door trim. Driveway parking areas contain holes and uneven repairs. Staff also observed stumps, weeds, and debris around the property. Staff made contact with the office and informed them of the complaint and observed violations. Office staff said they would forward this information to their manager, Tracy, and owner, Jeffrey Wells. 3/12/2018, site visit revealed no change and no contact has been made to work out a plan to improve the conditions. Notice of violation was sent. 4/18/18, a site visit found no changes. 5 inoperable vehicles were tagged for tow. 4/19/18, staff received a complaint about the potholes in the driveway parking lot and security lights not working. 4/24/18, staff had a meeting with property owner to discuss issues of several of his properties, Palms East being one of them. And we went over all of the issues that were in the notice of violation that needed to be corrected. 5/25/18, site visit revealed property has been mowed and some toppled over parking structures have been removed. Otherwise, the property remains the same. No one at this time has contacted staff to discuss a plan of action. 6/5/18, staff conducted a site visit and found no changes from the May visit. 1 vehicle was tagged for tow. 8/7/18, site visit found no changes. Search of the database found no permit applications for the issued violations. No permits were applied for or obtained to remove the shade structures that had electrical which need to be properly disconnected. 9/3/18 to 12/3/18. Several site visits during this time frame revealed there have been no changes and the violations are still present. 2/14/19, Cape Canaveral Fire Rescue notified staff that they have informed Palms East management they can no longer make access to the property until the roads are repaired. 2/21/19, this morning. Staff met with management staff and went over the violations on the property. All the untagged or non-operational vehicles were stickered for tow but remain on the property. The grass has been mowed, but there were some areas closer to the buildings that exceed 6 inches. The stumps have been removed. Toppled over parking structures have been removed, but some support poles and beams remain. Most potholes are filled in, but some uneven pavement and smaller holes remain, and trash and debris is cleaned up. They are currently working on the wall AC units and covering them up with tarps so they can't be seen from the right of way, but this is temporary. The ground AC units still need to be shielded from view from the right of way. The soffits are actively being repaired or removed, and chipped paint on the doors and walls remain, but will be addressed. No violations listed on the notice of violation have been brought into compliance of this date.
Okay.
Now we're going to go through the photographs. They're pretty self-explanatory. This one's just showing, you know, the AC units that you can see. Those are visible from the right of way. The location that I took the photograph was not in the right of way, but the right of way is behind me. Here's a photograph. You can see the damaged poles and beams that we're talking about, where the shade structures were on top of and got ripped off. and how they're rusted and they need to be taken care of. Those are still standing at the time of this photograph. This is the roadway we're talking about. You can see the uneven pavement, cracks, potholes. More poles standing up, missing shade structures. This is the debris. You see the dumpsters there, but I guess the tenants there just don't want to use the dumpsters and they're just putting them on the ground there. Here's one of the toppled over shade structures that I was referring to. All of those have been removed. There's no more that are toppled over, creating a hazard any longer.
Are there any that are standing correctly?
Yeah, there's several. You'll see some more
Okay.
of those in the pictures. Untagged car. Right there, if you see right in the middle, up at the top, the AC units that are on the wall, there's supposed to be a grate over those, and the grate is missing. Couch. This pole right here, I'm not sure what this pole is, but as you can see, there's rebar coming through it, so it's in a state of disrepair. It needs to be taken care of.
Those used to be our street markers in the city. It would have a street name on it. There's a few of them left around.
This car right here, the tag is expired and it's in a state of disrepair. More trash. This is a poor photograph, but I was trying to depict how the grass and weeds were taller than 6 inches. In this photograph, it appears that it's mowed, but there was weeds that were taller. But they've since mowed it and they've kept up with it, other than a few little spots. Once again, another shade structure missing the shade. This one was showing that the structure is still there, but I wanted to depict how it's rusting and potentially could be a hazard down the road. This is an unlicensed boat or untagged boat. Expired tag. This is what's left when they removed the shade structures. This could be a hazard right here. Those would need to be removed. Yet again, another one. Another one. This is showing the weeds that are growing out of the AC units on the wall. They have since removed all of those. We walked the property today and we only found one, and it was just an oversight, but they've pretty much removed all of them.
Are the units I see on the ground, those are what's currently functioning
Those
as
are-
air conditioning or heating or
According to what I was
both?
told today, those are replacing what is on the walls.
Okay,
That some of the wall units aren't operational.
okay.
Here's another one. There's another toppled over shade structure. That's been removed. This is another view of the driveway with potholes and cracks. You can see they've tried to make some repairs in the past. And I went out today and they filled in the majority of the large potholes. But there's still some small ones. There's still uneven pavement. And I would need to get with fire rescue to see if it meets their requirements to be able to go down there. So that one's kind of still pending on where we're going to go with that.
Is that the south border of the property?
Yes, ma'am. There's a missing softening right there. Another missing AC grate. More missing softening and an AC grate. I believe this is another untagged vehicle. I'm just going to slowly go through these. They're pretty much repeating themselves. That one's, if you can see, the softening's missing along the roof edge. Unlicensed vehicle, flat tires.
Just to clarify, these are dated February 28, 2018,
Yes.
correct?
Okay, and these are from this morning. You can see that some of these poles are still standing. I spoke to them, and they're still in the process of removing them. They said that they're going to be removing them. This is the softening. They are working on the softening. They're planning on removing all of this. I've got some photographs further on that'll show you. They're planning on removing all of this and just leaving it bare. It doesn't require it to be there when I show you what they're doing.
What's gonna be bare? Where that
I'll
owes?
show you a photograph
Okay.
of what it's gonna look like. It's gonna look like that. That's what they're attempting to do, so they're removing the
Oh,
softening.
for the soffit.
Yes, yes. And that's that one weed right there is if you see it growing up behind that wire right there is the one weed that I still found it, so they missed one.
Determined.
These are the tarps that they're putting up. Temporarily, it would bring it into compliance of the wall units being not seen from the right of way, but long term that would start to fail and they would need to come up with something a little bit more permanent. This is what's on all the cars. The cars are still there, but they've all been tagged, giving them till tomorrow to have them all removed or they'll take action.
Okay.
As you can see, the dumpster area, everything's cleaned up. There's no more furniture laying around, trash and debris laying around. And you can see that the shade structures that you were referring to before, that those are, they're up and they're just kind of rusty looking and they probably need to be cleaned up and painted up.
What are the numbers of days per week that the dumpsters are emptied at this complex?
I believe it's twice a week.
Twice a
You
week?
would have to ask the property owner that.
Okay.
I'm certain of that. This is another photograph. I tried to replicate that other photograph that I took back on the 28th. Like I said, I didn't see any weeds or overgrown grass that was in violation today, other than some small little areas up against the building that maybe somebody missed. More structures that still need to be removed. That was another tagged car as well. And once again, this is what it's going to look like when they remove the softening, if you look at the top of the building. This right here is kind of getting a close-up view of what those beams look like underneath, how they're rusting and chipping, and really need to be painted. I'm believing that because of that is why they ultimately toppled over, because they're starting to rust and deteriorate.
Excuse me, back to that photograph. You see this structure at the bottom, the column, concrete?
Yeah, it's
You
chipped
see
away.
spalling and chipping at that. Is that just a decorative piece of concrete, or is that part of the foundation? Because if it's foundation, it is going to fall over.
I would only be speculating. The building official may be able to answer that question better, but that's something for a contractor. I don't know if that's supporting that, if it's just decorative. I wouldn't be able to answer that question.
Just as
But
an
still, it should be, it's still blight either way. It shouldn't be chipping like that. I don't know how far down into the ground those structures go.
There
I'm
was
just-
some where the spalling had totally taken that away, correct?
Yeah, I'm just-
All the way to the parking lot surface.
I'm raising the question that might be an unsafe structure.
Yes. This is the softening. If you look at the top, it's kind of in between what I showed you, what they're going for, and what was falling apart that they're removing. So there's a lot of stuff under there they have to take out to get to what that final product was that I had showed you in the other photographs. There's a little bit closer up. And some of those, there's new wood up in there too that they're working on. Okay.
Thank you. And who's speaking for Palms East this evening?
Louis Correja, Luiscarreja, on behalf of Palms East.
Spell that for me one more time,
Sure.
please.
Luiscarreja.
That I got. Okay.
Now, I have some documents I'd like to put on the record. I can have copies for the board if I could approach the secretary and give that to them.
You may pass them from here and we'll see that she gets
Okay.
one. And we're gonna enter this as exhibit number 1 for this case.
You want this as an exhibit or just more of a memo of law?
Say again.
It's a motion included, a motion to dismiss with a memorandum of law.
Then I think we should enter it as an exhibit.
goes down to the board secretary as an exhibit.
That's the one for Ginger.
All right.
Ginger, I haven't labeled it, but I'll let you.
You want that as a composite exhibit,
That's fine.
exhibit 1? And it's the same thing you already sent me?
Correct.
Okay. So take one of these and one from this stack.
Take one of these and pass the rest.
Okay. Take one of these and pass it on.
Super staple.
All these go to Ginger?
Well, no, you take one
Oh,
and pass
take
to
one and pass it on,
Paula.
okay. All right. Oh,
Be the same one? Thank you. The same that you sent me? Yeah.
Mrs. Dutcher, are you familiar with all of this paperwork that has come before us?
I have previously read it. Earlier today, I received it.
All right, would you like to, in 5,000 words or less, tell us what we're looking at?
I would love to, although probably to be fair, the attorney should probably present his argument, and then I'll be happy to summarize it
Okay,
for you.
just making sure we had the answers we needed in front of us. Okay, sir.
Thank you. Okay, well, the documents I've handed out and filed, one is a notice of intent, and the other one's a memorandum in opposition to this notice of violation, together with a motion to dismiss. The notice of intent, I'll address that one first. As members of the board may or may not know, my client is involved in multiple lawsuits against the city, 3 currently. 2 of which Mr. Robinson is a defendant in his individual capacity, and he is being represented by Ms. Nutcher and her firm that she's with. So it was a strong possibility that today we would be questioning Mr. Robinson about this matter, but in order for us to accurately present the case, we would have had to question him about some of those other matters that are currently in litigation. So we notified Ms. Nutcher and the firm to make sure that his interests were represented. But I see she's here, so that doesn't seem to be an issue at this moment.
I missed one part of what you said.
Sure.
Did you say that you will not be questioning him about the other two items that he's involved with?
Unknown at the moment, that may depend on the recommendation afterwards, but we'll have to see. That's why we had,
So it's an either or.
correct, it's possible.
Okay.
I don't know why any other lawsuits or properties would be relevant, but I guess we have to see how it plays out.
Keep interrupting, I'm sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
that's fine, anytime. The other document we have is the longer memorandum / motion to dismiss. Basically, we're requesting that the board dismiss this violation for the several reasons outlined in the memorandum, which are supported by case law. And I'm going to give just a brief outline of what those arguments are. It's our position that the notice of violation and the process is in violation of my client's procedural due process, substantive due process, as well as equal protection violations. As to procedural due process, it's our position that the notice of violation, it does not adequately present the charges that are against my client. In fact, there's not a single violation listed in that document. What we have is a couple paragraphs. Then we have a list of observations that Mr. Robinson made. After that, we have a bunch of codes set forth. And then after that, we have recommendations from Mr. Robinson. But nowhere in that document does it say violation is this against code this. It's simply left for my client to kind of figure out on their own what the violations are. So the notice is inadequate to constitute and a violation of due process. Now, as far as substantive due process, it's our position that the codes as written are vague. If you turn in the memo, I cite certain, not all of the provisions of the code, but there's certain provisions of the code in the memo.
What page are you reading from, sir?
I'm getting right to it. If you could give me 1 second, please. The substantive due process argument starts at the bottom of page 4, but the meat of it is on page 5. If you look towards the bottom, I discuss how it's impossible to discern from the notice of violation what actions are acceptable and what property conditions are acceptable and which are not. I cite section 3496 of the code that sets certain standards of appearance. However, the standards set forth are subjective and left basically to the whim of one or few individuals. Terms such as good appearance, maintenance, and upkeep, terms as weeds, obnoxious growths, accumulation of filth, all those terms are subjective in nature and are not adequate enough to apprise my client of what proper conduct is and what is not. Now, as far as the equal protection violation, it's our position that that Mr. Wells, as the board may or may not know, he has ownership interest in several properties throughout Cape Canaveral. We have this one, and then the ones that are involved in the 3 lawsuits, and several others. We believe that he's being targeted for whatever reason, perhaps because of the existence of these lawsuits, but there are significant amount of alleged violations that have been brought against him or those properties. And we've seen these same type of violations throughout the community. We've attached pictures to our memo. And those violations, such as alleged grass being overgrown, paint chips on doors, those sorts of things are exhibited in the attached exhibit to the memo. So for those reasons, we believe any one of them sufficient enough to have this dismissed, but certainly all 3 together, this matter should be dismissed in full and with prejudice. Now, as far as to there was one thing with Mr. Robinson's presentation I did see, I don't know if it was an error or maybe I didn't understand. He stated how several violations, alleged violations, were brought into compliance, but then the last sentence of the presentation said nothing was brought into compliance. So perhaps he can illuminate something on that, but it appears that, at least according to Mr. Robinson, my client, many of these issues have been addressed and continue to be addressed. So again, I ask for a dismissal of this case in full. I don't know if Mr. Wells had anything to add. No? Unless the board has questions, that's all I have.
I'm sure we're gonna have some.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody understand what you just heard?
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much. Chris, you all right?
This is fascinating.
I've got some things I'd like to address on some of the things that he presented. I'd like to start with the photographs, if I could, that he provided. I've gone through these photographs. Several of these things that he says are similar in nature to what he was addressed for are already being addressed. We've already either got notice of violations or we've spoken to the owners. For instance, some of this tall grass, this photograph right here. This is on Chandler. We have spoken to several tenants and owners that live along here, and we tell them to mow it, and they mow it, and then 5-6 days later, it grows back again.
Right.
So it's an ongoing issue with that, just like his property. He's mowed it, it's mowed. 6 or 7 days from now.
It grows again.
Yeah. This right here, similar to chipping paint. I'm not aware of where this is, but he's more than welcome to file a complaint, and we will address it accordingly. Same with this photo right here. This photo right here, I'm assuming it's because the AC unit's not shielded from the right-of-way, but the code says when practical. Yes.
May I interrupt?
Yeah.
You're saying this photo, and I don't know if anybody knows, I mean, for the record.
Oh, you guys don't
are
have
they-
the photos
are they-
in front
are
of
they-
you?
Are they,
They're all in this package.
numbered? Yeah, are they
They
numbered?
are
You go in
not.
order?
I don't have them numbered. I'm just showing them to you, and hopefully you can find it.
Well, I have them. I have them. I'm just asking for the record.
Might want to put a little description in what you're
Okay.
referring to.
Right now, I'm on the one with the blue building and the number 5 door.
Ours are all black and white, but we have that one. That's the
Okay.
first one
It'll
under
be the gray
Exhibit A.
building with the white door with the number 5.
Yep.
And you'll see that there's an AC unit. I don't see any other violations here, so I'm assuming that's what this photograph is depicting, is an AC unit visible from the right-of-way. But it wouldn't be practical to shield this because there is a sidewalk right there in front of the AC unit. So the code says when practical. It's not practical to shield that due to the sidewalk.
You need to let these people behind you see what you're talking about.
There's the AC unit, this is the sidewalk. It wouldn't be practical to put something up in front. I don't see anything wrong with the door. This right here, the picture of the emu with all the shrubbery in front of it. And then the back page is the same location, just without the emu that I can see. This wouldn't be considered tall grass and weeds. This is a bush. On his property, it's not overhanging onto the property. It's not creating a hazard in any way. It's simply a bush that he has growing around the edge of his property. So we don't see that this is a violation in any way. And this is the property, I believe it's at the intersection of Poinsettia and Lincoln. This is the gentleman that's lived there since the inception of Cape Canaveral, I think. The next one is this photo of the townhouse. This is the one on Ridgewood.
Yes. It has a new roof.
Yes, they're doing work on it, but this is one that we have an active case on. I believe it even has liens on it. So we're aware of that, and we're working on that one. Then we have 2 more photos. Here's some ACs, and then another AC behind some bushes. The code requires you to screen an AC. It could be lattice, it could be a wall, it could be bushes. This right here, they clearly have had it screened with bushes, but it appears one of the bushes has died or been cut back or whatever it is. So the attempt to screen this is there. They would probably need to put a bigger bush there, however. These right here with the multiple ones, I'm not sure where that is. I don't know where the picture was taken from, so I couldn't determine if those are visible from the right of way or not. If they are, a complaint can be filed and we will address it. And there's other photos here, and we can go on and on and on with the photos. But I'm just trying to show that we regularly issue these violations. We've had cases before you in the past few months that are exactly the same violations, just on different properties. So it is addressed. So there's no nitpicking or anything going on here. We're addressing the violations. Complaints came in. We've addressed them.
No targeting.
No, ma'am. No targeting whatsoever. I wanted to touch on how everything was vague, that nothing applied to what notice of violation said, applied to the codes.
Say that again?
I wanted to talk about how he said everything was vague.
V-A-G-U-E.
V-A-G-U-E.
Vague, got it.
Ambiguous. They
it.
they couldn't understand what I was referring to in the notice of violation. I think it's very clear. Everything that I wrote up, not only do the bullet points say what they needed to do, my introduction paragraph of what I observed saw what the violations were. And then if you read the ordinances, just for example, section 3496, standards established, B, they talk about all parts thereof shall be maintained in good repair and shall be capable of performing the function for which such structure or part of any feature thereof was designed or intended to be used. An example would be paint, chipping paint. The purpose of paint is to protect the surface underneath. So it needs to be functioning for which it was designed to be used for. It states it right there. So that applies. Another example are the soffits. It's to be protecting what's underneath the soffits. In most cases, it's to protect entry into the attic by pests. In this case, it was just a decorative structure, but it still was blight to the neighborhood. And blight is mentioned, blight and deterioration is mentioned throughout this. So it directly applies, both in the notice of violation, but then there's also in the April visit with Mr. Wells. We set all this out for him. We explained in detail what needed to be done when he met with us. Told him this is what needs to be done, these are what the violations are. And thirdly, on my visit this morning, I met with the management staff. I did not walk them around and point out violations. They walked me around and said, this is what we're doing with this is what we're doing with this. They pointed everything out. So by the time they were done and I looked at my list, we had covered everything. So if there was any vagueness whatsoever, I don't understand how she was able to point out all of these violations and what they're doing to address them if they didn't understand what they needed to do. So they clearly understood what needed to be done. It's been explained to them in writing. I think it's very clear in my notice of violation. It was very clear in the meeting that I had with Mr. Wells, and it was very, very clear today when they walked me around the property pointing things out. So I don't really have anything more to say on that.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, questions, comments, discussion?
I'd like to make a comment.
Okay.
Like I said, I find this quite interesting, but I'm very concerned that we learned early on that the fire rescue feels it does not have access to the entire property. Is that what you said?
Yes, we found that out on the 14th. They notified us.
Well, that sounds like life safety issue to me.
Yes, sir.
And on that basis alone, I would think.
Well, let's make sure that's not applicable, is that applicable to a particular viation listed?
That's
in the-
applicable
Yeah,
to the
the
potholes and the deterioration
Potholes.
of the driveway and parking lot and everything like that.
To me, that weighs heavily against a blanket dismissal of the complaint. I guess I would also like to ask our counsel her view on the notion of, the interesting argument was fair notice given, particularly in light of Chris's just comment that they took him around and had addressed everything he had mentioned. I personally find the recommendations, paragraph 4 on page 5 of the citation of the notice, pretty clear. I mean, I think I understand what's called for on those. It looks like pretty plain English to me. So I guess I'm asking our counsel if it's fair to read the recommendations in conjunction with the cited code provisions to arrive at a reasonable interpretation as to what the homeowner, the landowner is being directed to do to correct the violations. That would be my question.
Sure. Well, let me read to you what the law says on due process. For procedural due process, you're looking for fair notice. That's what you're looking for, fair notice, and an opportunity to be heard. The U.S. Supreme Court has said that notice must be reasonably calculated under all the circumstances to apprise interested parties of the action and afford them an opportunity to present their objections. Notice must be of such a nature as reasonably to convey the required information, and it must afford a reasonable time for those interested to make their appearance. There is not any particular law that says what a notice of violation has to include. Chapter 162, which governs this board, does not contain any detailed information about what must be contained in a notice of violation. Just have to give fair notice as to what the violations are. Substantive due process, the argument he was making about the vagueness of the codes, I can read you the law on that. I'm not sure it's applicable in this case, but it requires that, generally it's a statute that's being challenged or a code, gives a person of ordinary intelligence fair notice of what constitutes forbidden conduct. So fair notice, again, we're talking about, was this fair notice to let the respondent know what was in violation and what he needed to do to bring it into compliance?
I have questions about the length of time between this was when the board order was first written and
Notice of violation.
notice of violation, and now we're 1 calendar year later, almost to the day.
Yes, ma'am. I was hoping to work with them. That's why we had the meeting with Mr. Wells, and he told us that he was going to assign an individual to address these issues with us. And we waited and waited and waited, and we never heard anything. So ultimately, I finally did the notice of hearing.
Okay, thank you.
I also have just, Mr. Dickey presented this. We have an interactive map on our website that shows all the code violations that we're working on. I wanted to present this so that you all could look at, and every single dot here, there's a different color that represents some different violation. And I'd like to present this so that you can look at that, and they could always refer to it to see that we're addressing all of these violations everywhere, and it shows the numbers that we have.
Composite exhibit?
And like I said, that's interactive. You can go on the city website and view that.
That's just one document, but you're giving copies of the one document, is that right?
Yes. So they could each view it.
How's Mr. Correa?
I could give him a copy.
I can share here.
May I ask a question directly of Mr. Wells or his representative?
That's up to the attorney to determine who he wants to call as a witness, but yes, certainly, or the attorney if you want the attorney to come forward.
It was on the website for a while.
I'm sorry?
I have a question.
Chair wanted to ask you a question.
Okay, sure.
When did Mr. Wells acquire title to this property?
Acquire the property?
2005. I moved here in January of 1967. That was the newest, hottest address on the beach, from the port to Patrick.
Wow.
I wish you could have seen the place then. I beg your pardon? It's a lot older and so am I, but most of me still works. And I try to maintain and upkeep what I've got left. So. It was also one time our city library. We had all kinds of functions occurred in that building.
Do you want to get any more information from either the attorney or maybe the recommendation from the code officer?
Are we ready for a recommendation, or do we have any more questions? Maybe we'll have some after you make your recommendation.
Okay, here it comes.
Let's do that.
Based on the testimony and evidence submitted at this hearing, staff respectfully requests that the Code Enforcement Board find the respondents in violation as set forth in the notice of violation and give the respondents until March 20th, 2019 to come into compliance, or fine be imposed in the amount of $150 for the first day and $100 every day thereafter until compliance is confirmed by the Code Enforcement Officer, and all costs associated with the enforcement of the violation be imposed.
Question. Almost everything that they have to repair has to have a permit. Is that correct?
If they are, no. If they're going to be removing those posts that have electrical in them, they'll
Right.
need permits.
Okay.
If they're going to be rebuilding soffitting, they'll need permits. But based on what they explained to me today, they're removing everything. So it would not require permits. If they're going to, if the pothole filling isn't enough and they're going to have to completely redo the streets, that would require a permit. Everything else is just painting, maintaining the property, having vehicles towed, fined, whatever that may be. So very few permits, if any.
If any.
How, may I ask, they have to have certain permits to do some of the things that I understand they've already done. They removed the parking canopies, they removed soffits. And you,
Well, removing the soffits would not require a permit. Putting new soffit in would require a permit so it can be inspected. In their defense, they didn't remove the canopies, Hurricane Irma did. So we really couldn't do anything for them on that.
Well, it's my-
But if you saw that the poles were still there, those have electrical in them, removing those would require permits. Everything else that you saw removed was damaged due to high winds.
well, if you remove a soffit, you have to redo the roofing and the corner area to ensure that it's waterproof. And you're saying that doesn't require any permit?
This particular structure does not, because the soffitting was pure decoration. It wasn't preventing access to the attic. I can go back and show you the photographs.
There's no crawl space up there.
If you look at that, none of that, you have it up?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you look at that, none of that goes into the building. Maybe I can find one that's completed better. Okay, if you look at that right there, that's what it looks like when they're removed. And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing to stop them from doing that. And removing that doesn't require a permit. We just recently required permit for soffitting to be installed, and that was just recently. So at this time, we don't require them to get it to remove it.
All
So
right.
this is just purely aesthetic.
Just hold it a moment. So remove and repair the vehicle canopy structures, no permit.
No, if they're going to repair the canopy structures, they're going to put new ones in, yes, they would need a permit.
Okay.
If they haven't removed any, to my knowledge, themselves, they were taken down by high winds. If they're gonna remove these, and I advised them of that today, if they're gonna remove these poles, which have electrical in them, they'll need to get a permit because the electrical need to be disconnected.
Why is there electrical in those poles?
Lights,
Lights?
Lights on the underside of the structure?
yes, sir.
Are they on the interior side of those supports?
They're on the exterior from the ones that I saw. They explained to me today that they're leaving some of them up because they still have working lights, and they want, it's a safety concern is what they told me today. But they do have plans to removing them and maybe even putting pole lights in there.
Okay, how about the repair of the driveways and the parking lots?
That would require a permit unless they're just filling in the potholes. If you see in that photograph that I still have up, those potholes right there are just filled. That doesn't require a permit, but that's only gonna be a temporary fix. In a month, with traffic driving over those, that's just a cold patch. In a month, just driving over those, it's gonna just pull it right out.
Okay, and there's no permit for the AC units?
Just shielding them? No, sir.
Okay, so there's only 2 permits that they are possibly required to do?
Yes, sir.
I saw a variety of windows in all of the buildings put together. Are they all in good working order, or what kind of shape are we talking?
Windows was a whole different case that we're working on them on. So I didn't address windows here because
Okay.
we've addressed it in a separate case that didn't go to this level, but we're working with them on those windows.
Okay, thank you.
For my benefit, of what are the items that remain that are not in progress at this time?
They haven't addressed any painting. The chipping paint has not been addressed at all. They have not addressed any of the shielding of the AC units on the ground from the right of way. And only one AC unit on the wall has the tarp that they put over it to shield it from the right of way. The
Does
rest
it-
of them remain.
Is it operable?
I don't know. Like I said, I think they're phasing out all the ones on the wall for the ground units to do. So some of them are operable, some of them aren't. That particular one, I don't know if it's operable or not.
How many AC wall units are there to be tarped?
That you would have to ask the property owner on that. I would estimate 15, 16, something like that. I would have to go out and individually count them.
And when we're talking about chipping and painting, we're talking about the entire building?
It's mostly around those AC units with the big giant grates. I guess when they came off, maybe they chipped it and it just went from there. And then there's some door trim and doors that need to be painted. There's some sections of wall that are coming off, and then there's some graffiti that needs to be painted over.
Has the scoping and nature of the painting and chipping been pointed out to the property owner?
I pointed it out today. Yes, today was the first time that I've been able to meet with somebody on site to go over what the issues were and what they were doing to fix those issues.
So we're not
Is-
talking windows and we're not talking roof. We are talking things that are applied to the ground, to the building.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm looking at the scope of the whole project. 30 days is, a miracle could occur in 30
Oh,
days, but I'm not
that's just
holding my breath.
that was just a number we threw out there because 5 to 30 days is the standard that we go by with notice
Right.
of violations. So I put that in there. By all means, you can discuss it with the property owner, what they think is a reasonable time frame
Okay.
to get this into compliance. Because like this case is so old, we really need to get it taken care of.
When it comes time, I want to ask the property owner, are you disputing that the nature, that what Mr. Robinson is saying about going over the scope of this, are you disputing the scope of this work?
I want to have him come forward.
Is that in dispute?
I don't know that I understand your question regarding scope.
What I'm saying is, Mr. Robinson indicated that he had met with your people, your staff, and
He
has
has
gone
not.
over these items that we have just discussed.
He has not.
He has not done that.
No, he has not.
Who did he say he met with
He had a meeting
today?
with me.
Oh, you're not
This-
staff, you're manager.
This building didn't come up. We have other issues before the city that were more urgent. We discussed those. We did not talk about Palms East in any regard during that meeting.
Officer Palmer was with me when we had the discussion with him, and I met with Tracy today and walked through the property.
Well,
That
I'm
is
looking at.
correct. He did meet with Tracy today.
Well, Mr. Wall, I'm looking at a photograph right now before me that's dated February the 21st. So I assume the staff was on site.
Correct. Today was the first time that he met on property. And let's cut to the chase on the fire code thing. I'll invite any or all of you tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock to come to the property and walk the driveways. I think
Sir, the real issue though is the fire safety. They're the one, you get them out there to say, you're right, it's okay.
this is the first time I've heard
Okay.
about the fire safety issue, okay? And I'll bet you all dinner that it's not true. There is no way that those roads are unpassable the way they're describing it. I venture to ask any one of you, along with the building official, to come out and look.
Well, again, I'm just trying to make the point. It's a call by the fire safety people. That's, if they
Exactly.
made that call, that's who you need to convince.
Okay?
Exactly.
We'll have them out there tomorrow morning also.
If I could, real quick, the building official was with me today, and he could testify to the condition of the roads.
Right, but the issue is whether the condition of the road is a problem for fire safety.
Exactly.
That's what I see as
That's
the
exactly correct.
point there. Okay.
Yeah, I was advised by Jeff Roberts, the fire inspector, that he informed them that they needed to do patchwork in that back street.
Patchwork.
Yes, he
What
said
we're
the
looking at-
potholes were much larger than they could manipulate with their vehicles, so.
Okay.
Follow up again with the question that we thought brought you up here was there a disagreement from your perspective as to the scope of the needed work?
I don't understand what you mean by scope.
The recommendations on page 5, or paragraph 4. Block the view of the AC units, is that in dispute as a requirement under the code?
The question is, which ones are visible from the right-of-way?
I think that's a fair.
There's only one right-of-way on the whole property. It's Caroline Street. So the whole back of the complex is not visible. So the fact that they call for all the AC screening to be done without giving us the detail. The pictures that you saw today, we saw them today for the very first time. Okay? If you give me pictures of what's out of code, we will fix it. But just by one statement, there are 660 doors in this complex. So if you think that the scope of repair chipped and paling paint on doors and trim, 660 of them.
Well, if they all need it, they all need it.
They don't all need it, ma'am. Now, let's just take a look
Let's
here.
talk percentage here.
Let's talk about,
No, let's talk percentage. I'm the
took a
chair,
picture.
you're interrupting me.
Okay.
Percentage-wise, approximately how many of those 600 and some odd doors need to be chipped and painted? I'm asking you, sir.
ma'am,
You're the-
I don't know. I don't
You're
have any
not- You're
idea.
not spending much time on your property, and if that's the case, if
Ask
you're letting
Mr.
everybody.
Robinson.
Don't interrupt me. You have an office manager, a property manager? How often do you communicate them about some of the issues we've discussed here tonight?
We generally turn the units and do complete makeovers when we turn the units.
And how often are you turning a unit these days?
It's not as frequent as it used to be.
I can
Once a
see why.
year,
Once a year?
once a year or longer,
What's your minimum lease?
1 year.
Okay. How many units are there totally?
216.
You've got those statistics down, Pat.
Ma'am, with all due respect, I have a picture that I would like you to pass along.
Is this a metal door?
Yes, sir, I believe it is.
That's a double door. What does it enter into, a utility area?
May I ask a question, ma'am? Is the paint chipped on it?
Yes, sir, but it's the door here into this building.
It's the front door to your building?
Yes, sir, I
ma'am.
noticed that as I came in this evening, but that I think was from diamond rings and long fingernails.
I have the same problem, except it's generally just long fingernails. We don't have many diamond rings over at Palms East. So the question is code enforcement going to start working with us, or are we going to get complaints that we cannot respond to? He should have provided the pictures that he had. He should have been more specific in what he did, because every single day on Palms East, there's a code violation, okay? I can't control what my tenants do to their front door on a weekly, monthly, or even a daily basis. And so if you want, you can find a code violation there every single day. Mr. Robinson came over one day and told us that we were in violation because the grass wasn't cut properly. There was one weed in a field that got missed, and that's what he cited. So the question becomes, is this harassment because the length and breadth of this notice of violation is unfathomable? In other words, I could paint 50 doors, and there would still be one or two that we missed.
Mrs. Chairman, may I make a statement?
Yes, sir, you may, Mr. Dickey.
Yeah, I think you're getting a sense of our frustration and our difficulty working with this individual property. And I think you're getting a little taste of what we've been dealing with over the last 12 months on trying to bring some of these items to closure. You can hear from the testimony this evening that staff has been working for 12 months to bring some of these issues to closure. And only until we have zero cooperation, I won't say zero. Let me take that back. We've had not as much cooperation as we would like to have or wish to have had, that we've had to get to this point and come to this board and have this discussion. So we are certainly looking for the board to work with staff, also work with the property owner. It's a three-way street. And but I just feel you're getting a sense of our challenge that we've had with this particular property owner, and I think the pictures and testimony this evening speak for themselves.
The last time Mr. Wells was here, I believe he had to leave to go to his son's soccer game.
Yeah.
So he didn't hear all of the discussion that occurred in that meeting. And I understand going to your son's soccer game, it's important as going to anything else that one of your children does. But, you know, the scope is huge. You have got a big mess on your hands, and it's going to take an awful lot of work and an awful lot of time and an awful lot of money to clean it all up. And it's still, if you want to call it delayed maintenance or however, whatever adjective you want to put in front of the word maintenance, you haven't been doing it. And I'll try to hush now.
You know, I believe what we were trying to do, we were attempting to define the scope and whether that was in dispute. And if we can come to an understanding, because I believe what the staff was talking about was the extent of the time that was be required in order to come into compliance. So I think you can see, Mr. Wall, that we are attempting to work through this matter in order to get it resolved. It's not the position of this board to harass people or to unduly fine people. We try to work through these matters. So I think that's what we're attempting to do. Now, if the scope remains still in dispute, then maybe measures could be taken to quantify that in a way that you and your people could clearly understand what that is. But I think we need a reasonable period of time, I believe is what Mr. Robinson is talking about, in order to come into compliance. And so I think that's what we're trying to quantify and address here.
Even a plan to come into compliance.
Yes.
That's what we need more than anything, is a plan and a calendar.
I think we accomplished a lot of that today when I met with Tracy out on site, and I explained all of this. Some of these things, like the ACs, we weren't requiring every single AC. We're requiring the ACs that are visible from the right of way. And I don't need to take a photograph of that, because if you're in the right of way and you see an AC, it needs to be shielded. I mean, it's cut and dry. There's no ambiguity in this at all.
If there's peeling paint, it needs to be painted. If there's a softening, it needs to be repaired. I could have had 72,000 photographs depicting all of this. I didn't think you all would want to sit through that many photographs. So it just needs to be addressed. And as the property owner, I and us believe that you should know what's going on your property and what needs to be repaired and what doesn't. But as for seeing that, today was the first day that I've been able to meet with a staff member and go over what those violations are. And they explained what they were working on and how they're going to go about doing it. So
there is a plan?
there was no time frame. They just explained what they're working on, that they're going to look for materials or what they're going to do to screen the ACs. I told them, which buildings probably you don't even need to worry about. None of the buildings across the back, just north of Washington, nothing there needs to be screened, because they're not visible from the right of way because there's a buffer zone. We explained the painting, they'll get to that. So we went all of that. So there's not so much of a plan as we just discussed what the issues were and what they're doing about them,
And we're back to the word scope.
pretty much.
Okay. Right, would you put your board order back up, please? Mr. Wells, do you have anything further you wish to say right now? I want to look at the suggestion from the staff.
I'll reserve time, if I may, just to respond, okay?
You
If
may have it,
necessary.
sir.
There you go, ma'am.
After the year 2019, would it be possible to devise a plan and time frame to come into compliance, or a fine be imposed? If they come in by March the 20th with working orders, a plan, a time frame.
Whatever you decide you
Does
want to do.
anybody see where I'm going
I'm
with
willing
this
to be
motion?
open to
Exactly.
working with them to get the property in
I've
compliance.
got two saying yes over here and one saying no.
Well, I guess for clarity, if you're saying for them to have a plan, I mean, really, you want them to be in compliance, and if you want to give them more time than the March 20th date, but I'm not sure if it's a good idea to just say they have to have a plan.
It's some kind of a framework to come into compliance.
Really, your job is to give them a time to come into
We
compliance.
will, but I don't think they're gonna be able to do it without some serious planning.
Well,
How would be
technically,
the
you're
best way
not,
to do it?
the board is not the entity to tell them how to come into compliance. The board is the entity to say, come into compliance by a certain date.
This is your,
The chairwoman, made a valid point.
Yes.
Trying to do common sense stuff.
and we know that it's not gonna be in compliance by the 20th of March.
Then give them more time.
Well, if I understood Mr. Wells, there seems, am I correct, sir, that you would facilitate whatever it's gonna take over the next month to come up with a plan. And then we can revisit it. The plan, passes muster with staff. And I don't think we have a lot of issues. Then it's just how long is it gonna take, and is that reasonable?
And our attorney needs to know that this is a common practice with this board. We have done this before in the past.
And in fact, we have deferred rulings until a subsequent meeting to allow certain events to occur or determinations to be made.
Not a good
So,
idea.
again, my question to Mr. Wells is, am I right in getting the sense you'd be willing to work with staff? Whatever resources are necessary to get the plan done and come to a common sense agreement, or attempt to.
I think if you grant 30 days to come to an agreement to determine what I think I understand now is the scope, we'll have Mr. Robinson inspect every single unit, every single facade, every single door, so that we understand the scope of what we need to do, rather than just being told that the doors have chipping and peeling paint on them, all 660 of them.
I think you're being a little bit nitpicking about that. We all know what a door that needs to be painted looks like. You shouldn't have to look at all of them.
No, I'm apologize, ma'am, I'm not being nitpicky, because what happens,
That is nitpicking.
well, wait a minute, hear me out. The idea is that we have to set a parameter that allows us to accomplish the goal. If a door is not seen as having chip paint on it, then 6 weeks, 2 months, 6 months later, you come back by, it now has chip paint or it has a scratch in it. So we need to establish what is the violation and then a time frame to do it. And why wouldn't we go to each unit and look at each door? It's 216 different units, but it's not going to take that much time. Isn't it better for us to know and for the city to know exactly what the problem is?
Madam Chairman, if I
Yes,
may, I don't think that's an unreasonable request to know the scope of the work.
And I now understand your scope questions. I didn't.
Right.
I would like the
Because-
scope determined before I start working, so that in 6 months, I don't do everything I think is in the scope and find out that there's, oh, we meant over here, or this is wrong.
We're not redefining the code. We're simply pointing out at this point in time, this is what the code is saying is addressed to these items. Mr. Robinson, is that a reasonable thing that you could do?
I have no problem with that. I think what we need to come up with, though, is a reasonable time frame so that we can have a compliance hearing. I've already given this case a year, so I don't want to keep dragging this out. I have no problem meeting them out there and going door to door if that's what they want to do, so that we can get this property in compliance.
Does staff have an idea of, do you have any problems in the restriction, in the time? Do you have any problems in proceeding with this and meeting with Mr. Wells and his staff in a timely fashion to
In
do
other
this?
words, what time frame does he need in order to go through the complex?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I'd like to say
Mr.
something,
Dickey
Mr.
already
Chairman.
like to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're putting staff in a fairly awkward position. What's going to potentially, what could happen is Chris and whoever Mr. Wells assigns to this task is going to go start walking around, and they're going to start going over 206, how many doors? 200 plus doors. And what happens if there's a disagreement between Chris and the maintenance individual about whether this meets the, as Mr. Wells says, this kind of ambiguous language? So I think the prudent course of action here is to have Mr. Wells prepare a plan of action, what he believes is in violation based on the notice of violation that he's been provided, that meets the intent of law, as you heard from our counsel this evening, and then staff can review that. And but I'm just concerned that we're putting staff in a very precarious situation. I'm not sure if Deborah would like to.
I think it would be more efficient if Wells and staff work together to generate that. Otherwise, Mr. Wells will come up with something, staff will find problems with it, or won't, but probably will say, well, we don't, maybe then
vice
they'll
versa.
accuse you of being vague, I don't know, you know. You'll say, we'll repair all the doors that need repair. Well, we're right back where we are. So, I hope, I fully appreciate what you're saying, and I sense where the frustration for staff is coming. I get it, but we're trying to solve a problem. So if 30 days, till the next meeting, say, staff says it'll make itself available, Mr. Wells, can you assure staff that whoever needs to be there on your behalf will be there at reasonable times and places? Come up with this plan.
We'll make ourselves available 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Well, okay, but
Now you see what I'm dealing with.
I understand.
Now you understand Mr. Dickey's violating constitutional rights because he's putting the job of code enforcement back on us. This is the attitude that I'm dealing with.
Wait just a
well,
minute.
no, sir. No, wait a minute. I'm sorry, Chairman, but you're getting it wrong. Now, if you want staff and us to make the decision as to what you have to do. Without your input, I don't think that's the wise way to proceed. But if that's the way you want to do it, we can do it that way. But what we're trying to offer you is the opportunity as a businessman, as a landowner, as a member of the community, to come up with something that's reasonable. And hopefully staff can accommodate you. Hopefully you can accommodate staff. Or do you want to leave it up to us? I wouldn't. It's up to you, Mr. Wells.
I've already agreed to have Mr. Robinson go around the complex and let's agree on what needs to be done.
Right.
Now, Mr. Dickey wants it at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning? You
No,
know,
I
don't-
didn't say that. I said we can make ourselves available, Mr. Wells. Don't put words in my mouth.
Okay.
You invited everybody there at 8 a.m., so
Well, we want the fire, we want to make sure you understand that this paving is not impassable. Let's start there with this thing. And again, I'll go out and take a video tomorrow morning, and we'll present it to you next time we meet. And we'll have the fire marshal there too. So I'm open. If 30 days is enough for staff to go through the building, let's do it. I'll provide the people, and then we'll do the maintenance. He can come back and check it out.
And how many days would you require after the staff has gone through and compiled their finite list?
What
Will
would
you
think
need to
is a-
reply
what-
to it?
What would you think is a reasonable time, ma'am? I would ask you, what do you think is reasonable?
If we can do that in 30 days, I believe your staff should be able to do it in the following 30 days.
You're gonna, maybe 60. Why don't we go 60 in the following?
Now
I don't know what the scope is yet.
Okay, then we'll come back and we'll present the scope to you, and you can decide how much time we're owed.
Well, my sincere hope is that when you're working with staff and the two sides say, well, we know what a soffit is, and we know whether they're damaged or not, right? I mean, I don't think that should be mysterious. You will know how long it'll take to do it.
Okay, so 30 days to determine scope, and then how many days after that to fix it?
Well, my hope would be if you see a soffit hanging there, you send somebody to fix it.
Sure.
You don't need to wait to the next hearing to start doing these things.
Again, how many days?
If I may.
Yeah.
There are certain items here where the scope is, I think has been defined. The soffits, are all of them to be removed or just the damaged soffits?
Well, it would be just the damaged soffits. So if anything's hanging on the current soffits that they haven't removed, that would either need to be repaired or completely removed.
All right,
So they couldn't have one building with half of it with soffits and the other half with no soffits. It would have to be the whole building be removed or that one soffit hanging on that one building repaired.
is there confusion over the soffits?
The soffits are not the issue.
Okay.
I think it's the ideas that, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Wells, if I may, I just want to clarify a few of these items real quickly. How about the AC units? Do they need
Need
to
to
be?
determine what is visible from the street.
All right, AC units. How about canopy structures? Are they, do we have to quantify those? Are they?
I think they're all down.
They're all down?
Well, there's several issues. The ones that have been toppled are gone.
Right.
We still have posts that are freestanding that need to be removed. That would require permits. And then we have the peeling paint that I showed you where they're rusting and everything, which could potentially lead to another hazard and another collapse.
Yeah, Mr. Wells, is there any confusion about that?
Other than the standard of what is stable and what's not. In other words, rust does not designate instability, it just designates old age.
Yeah, and I'm not sure we are going to have a structural engineer there to make that
I don't-
determination.
That's
Well,
correct.
it would be blight, so.
Right, a
Would
blight,
also be hazardous.
right. How about, trash and debris is not in dispute? You have already started on that project, I assume?
I didn't see any today.
I'm sorry, Mr. Wells.
Sure, if we had them out today, I think.
Okay, untagged vehicles, that's not in dispute.
No, but
Okay.
you have to understand, about the vehicles, I'm not,
Yeah,
the
I'm
people that
just-
live
I'm
there are
just
not
quantifying.
rich. And
I-
sometimes, we've towed vehicles in the past and angered a tenant who was working on that vehicle, and we give notices. Again, these are not rich people. And sometimes they get into trouble with their vehicles. So a tag on that one vehicle that we saw today, it was a pretty good-looking car. I'm not gonna tow that vehicle.
Okay.
Because the owner of it has an investment, and he or she can't afford the $150 to $200 to pull it out of hock. So again, well, let's walk around and we'll look at the vehicles. Some of them need to be removed, but the one that I saw in the picture with the expired tag, I wouldn't do it. It looked like a pretty nice car. And the boat
Boats and
is the
trailers.
one guy that takes his kids out in it. Okay, let's get him to tag it. But you saw the bicycles next to the boat, right? So again, we deal with people that are lower middle class and struggling. So we try to accommodate them. But if you tell me I gotta remove them, and if we can walk at the same time we walk and look at the doors. Let's let Mr. Robinson decide.
Well, without discussing all of what you just said about an untagged vehicle, it's not permitted within the city. So let's, but you have those vehicles on site. That's not something that we have to quantify, is it, or is it? You have additional vehicles that have, I think he mentioned earlier that he had identified those vehicles. Is that correct, Mr.?
There was multiple vehicles there that had tags on them. Whether they're gonna be removed tomorrow, I don't know.
But those vehicles have been tagged, though, is what I'm getting at.
They have to be tagged, and then you have to, there's a process, takes 14 days.
All right, and the stumps and trees, you've already started process, or that's been taken care of?
Yes, I didn't see any of those.
Is that in dispute, Mr. Wells?
not.
Okay,
Thank
so we have two items, the AC units and chipping and painting, is that correct? That need to be quantified?
Correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Stubs that support the,
Well,
Those don't need to be quantified.
Yeah.
The concrete and metal stubs. Those can be removed. Those are obvious.
Mrs. Chairman, just to get the record clear, I think there's a lot of, I'm not going to say misinformation, but there's a lot of information flowing around here. The city has a code that requires us to tow untagged, inoperable vehicles. The city has a code that says we have 72 hours once it's posted. The 14 days or whatever number Mr. Wells just threw out we're not subject to that. So we do not have to quantify that. We will go out, we will identify the cars that are in violation of the city code, and we will have those taken care of. So I think that's a non-issue. That's not something that needs to be discussed and quantified.
okay. So we basically narrowed this down to two areas that have to be quantified over the next X period of time as decided by the board.
but I don't like to see it limited to two areas.
I agree. When they're in agreement, they just make that notation, as part of the scope of the work that they come to agreement on. I mean, we're hoping for an objective document that we know what we expect, and they know what they're gonna do, and staff says it's sufficient. That's all we're looking for.
Yeah, Mrs. Chairman, we will do our utmost to quantify, we'll do our utmost to work with this property owner and come up with a reasonable plan to deal with these issues. Again, I think you're getting a sense of our frustration because there's not always common ground with this particular property owner. And so we're going to have to work through it. We will do our best to come up with a plan and come back to the code board with that plan for action.
So then we need to come up with how we're gonna word a recommendation, and we're back to where we were with this staff recommendation that's on the screen. I tried to modify it, somebody else jump on it.
I guess it would be giving until March 20th to cooperate with staff, to try to come to an agreed plan of action, scope of work, and a time frame. If it can't happen by the next meeting, then I guess, as I said to Mr. Wells, what I wouldn't want to do it is leave it up to the board here, us, to tell him what he's got to get done within 10 days or 2 days or whatever it is. So that would be my suggestion.
that your motion?
Find it violation.
Well, let's see.
I
Well,
think you,
see, if we avoid the violation thing, we avoid the whole, was the notice sufficient, da-da-da-da-da. I mean, we're trying to solve a problem. We'll have plenty of leverage next month if we need it.
But he is in violation of the original notice of, that was presented a year ago. That's a given. We're not disputing the fact that he's in violation. He's disputing the fact that we may have gone overboard, yada-da-da-da, they don't know what they're supposed to do, yada-da-yada-da. But the bottom line is, he is in violation of the, as originally presented. Now, to go forward from there,
Well, but I would point out, or I'd ask counsel, if we are to find a violation, does that require, today, does that require us to rule upon council's motion to dismiss?
Yes, go ahead and you should rule on the motion to dismiss.
So I would suggest we avoid that. It's a pretty
Okay.
serious issue.
Yes.
And it's an interesting argument and clearly well-researched and this and that, although our board counsel has also provided oral references that would oppose the motion. But I say, let's just sidestep it. Let's get this solution on the road. That's what I would suggest. That's why I would not go with a violation today. I would defer this until next month for the purposes expressed. Staff and respondent to cooperate to attempt to come to an agreement as to scope of work and timeframe for performing same.
written that all down, but I know exactly what you want to say. Did you get it, Ginger?
It's on the
Can you
recording.
make a motion out of that for us?
Go ahead.
I'll try to say it again. I move that we defer ruling in this case until our next meeting, which I assume is March 21st, I believe, 2019, with the understanding that during the interim, the respondent and staff have agreed to cooperate, to attempt to come up with a plan to address the notice of violation, to come to an agreed scope of work, and a time frame for accomplishing the remediation work. And we'll address all this next month. We'll see what the progress is, see if it's sufficient. So I move we defer with the understanding that they will meet, coordinate in good faith to try to come up to a plan that's agreeable with staff and the respondent. And hopefully they will, and they'll tell us how long it'll take, and that'll be that.
Our counsel is looking a little bug-eyed there.
Oh, no, I'm just tired. I would only recommend that your motion order the parties to cooperate and come up with a plan rather than say that it is your understanding that they will do that. Because you have the power to make the order, and if you can defer the finding of violation if you want, but you still have the power to order the plan be done within the 30 days.
Point well taken. I agree.
Should we ask Ginger to read it to us? She's roll.
shaking your head.
And I would be
No.
happy to look at if you want me to look at the order, I'll be happy to do that too.
Well, then to rephrase, I guess it would be, I move that we defer ruling on the notice of violation until the next meeting. Respondent is ordered to work with staff to come to agreement as to the scope of work and the time frame to accomplish same.
We have to have the word attempt in there.
Well, I can't order them to agree to anything. I mean, we can't order anybody to do anything that's subjective like that. They're gonna attempt to do it. If they operate, they're ordered to cooperate in good faith with staff, to come up with an agreed scope of work and a time frame to accomplish the agreed. Can't come to agreement, we'll address that next month.
Is there a second? Or have you digested it all?
I'll second it.
Ms. Collins is a second. Are there any further discussions or questions? Hearing none, please call the vote.
Ms. Russell,
4.
Mr. Clooney,
4.
Mr. Hale,
4.
Mr. Hartley,
Or,
Ms. Collins.
4.
We see you in a month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other business before this board this evening?
We have one more.
One more
Oh,
case.
we do. Sorry about that. I hope nobody had to sit through all this to wait.
It'll be quick.
Okay. Go, Mr. Robinson.
This is 516 Jefferson Avenue, case 18-277, mowing the lawn and removing a dilapidated structure on the roof. As of yesterday, they're in compliance.
She removed it, but she hadn't done anything about fixing the hole.
There is no hole.
No.
They just took it right off the side of the building, and they mowed the yard and even put some new landscaping in. So it's in compliance.
Okay. Thank you.
you have a,
You're-
you have a staff rep, we vote on that? Okay.
Yeah,
Or is
we
it
voted.
done?
We did it.
Oh, you did it?
Yeah, we voted. Oh, this one that's in compliance.
Yes,
Do we have to vote on
I don't know
Yes.
anything if it's compliance.
If you want, do you want that to?
that? We don't, if it's in
Okay.
compliance, we're through with it.
It's in compliance. Yeah.
We're good.
He just noticed us, that it was in compliance.
All righty, you're out of here. Sorry, I'm not gonna have any overtime on your